point if we have time for it. But first things first, another week of football has passed. How are we feeling about the current state of the National Football League?
Yeah, I mean, it is halfway through the year, and it's kind of a mixed bag now. I feel like coming out of this week when we look forward like to the rest of the NFL, because I feel like we had some games where we saw some teams look like kind of their season was over here, and kind of just some disappointment from some teams after them showing signs of being able to rebuild here, and maybe just being in worse trouble than we thought they were, and some teams just seeming like they may not be contending this year, especially when it comes to Thursday night football, because we had all of this hype around the Minnesota Vikings. We had Aaron Jones here. We had Jordan Addison. Free him, by the way. Free Jordan Addison. I don't know why he's been locked up here. I don't know why he hasn't been getting the ball, but free him. And then we have Justin Jefferson now for that team who's still putting up numbers. He had a really solid game without a touchdown. They're getting back their star tight end here, but overall, I just feel like they've gotten some unlucky breaks the past few games to lose here, where you go 5-0, start out really hot, and then looks like you're in control of your division. And then the Lions just come and take it from you. And then this game, the Rams literally get back their two nuclear fusion drives that just make their team go. I mean, this is a completely different team when you have Cooper Cup and Puka Nakua on the team. And Kyron Williams has played pretty elite football as far as running back standards for the modern day NFL. And their defense just does enough. And when you have those two guys there, like we were talking about, oh, Stafford's dealing with some injuries last week. And I was like, yeah, he is dealing with two injuries. It is Puka Nakua and Cooper Cup. And turns out as soon as they come back, they're the dark horse playoff contending team I thought they should be. Go out there and beat the Minnesota Vikings. Now, was that an obvious face mask call in the end zone? Yes. But at the end of the day, do I think the Vikings would have won that game if the car went the other way? No, I don't, because I just still don't believe Sam Darnold is that guy where I think he can take you to a point and win a lot of games, but when the going gets tough, I just don't expect him to come through for you, and he hasn't shown me that he's going to do it yet, especially when we're basing this off of the first 5 weeks of the season. Then you come off a bye and start losing games when we get into the time that matters.
Yeah, it seems to me that Sam Darnold will take you as far as whoever your opponent is, right? If you're going to face Jared Goff's a better quarterback. He's going to outperform you. Matt Stafford played a better game than Sam Darnold did. Sam Darnold plays well. Like he plays a clean football game, but I just feel like he doesn't push the envelope enough when it comes to when you're going to be competing against these playoff teams. I just don't know how they're going to continue down the stretch. I'm happy to look at their record, but I do want to talk about the Rams because obviously they had their injuries with Cooper Cup and Puka Nakua. Even Kyron Williams was banged up. Matt Stafford's dealing with a boatload of injuries as well, but you get them back, that offense immediately starts clicking. And I was actually pretty impressed with what I saw on the defensive side of the ball too. Kobe Turner's been making some good plays for them, and their defense this game was able to contain the Vikings, which is no easy task. So I liked what I saw a lot from the Rams, and for the Vikings, I just feel like their first five wins, like they banged it out. They played some really tough teams, but I feel like now they're starting to come back down to earth, and this game kind of solidified it for that. I think they're going to start to fizzle out.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the Niners are in like a tough position right now, but the Rams already beat them, and then Seattle, they just look broken on Sunday. So I feel like the Rams still do have a chance to go out there and win their division. Obviously, depending on what happens with the 49ers, but you already beat them once. And then I think you can go out there and rattle off some wins here now that you have Stafford with Nakua and Cooper Cup still healthy. And I think that game kind of proved all right, if we go out there and lose to the Vikings, probably not where we want to be. Let's go ahead and rebuild with potentially trade Cooper Cup, but if he comes back and both of them look really good and we go out there and beat the Vikings, that shows us we can beat maybe not the best teams in the league, but we can compete with any team in the league right now and not get rolled over.
Yeah, and it's interesting about that division is everyone's 4-4 basically. I know the Rams are 3-4, but the Cardinals, we don't believe in the Cardinals.
No.
It's great that they got their win, but I'm not impressed with them. We have the Seahawks who are falling apart, it seems like. The 49ers who are genuinely physically falling apart. Then that leaves the Rams, who looks like their health is coming in right at the right time. I could see the Rams going on a run and claiming that division, like we initially talked about in our first preview of this season.
Yeah, and we didn't expect them to win the division this year. We expected them to be a wild card team. And maybe if the Niners fully fell off the bandwagon, they won the division. But I think with them being healthy at the right time, like this is the perfect time to start putting it together. And then in maybe 2 or 3 weeks here, you really start to click. And we're almost at Thanksgiving right now. I mean, we're gonna be in November on Sunday. Like this is when the real football starts, and if you're gonna go out there and play lights out in November, like who do the Rams have coming up here that would really give them a challenge where you look at them and like, oh, they definitely can't beat that team
So the next month goes the Seahawks, which I think is a winnable game for them. They usually
for sure.
perform well against
No
them.
DK.
Yeah, no DK. The Dolphins, even with Tua back, I still think they can take that easily. The Patriots,
Torch
that
that
should be a win.
secondary. Torch the
Yeah,
secondary.
yeah. And then the Eagles on I can't tell if that's Thanksgiving or not, but I know that they'll face the Eagles following that. So they got 4 games. Eagles, it really depends on what Eagles team we see, but I think they should at least go 3-1 in that stretch.
For sure. And then you're looking up and you'd be, if I can do
Six
math
and
here,
6-4, I think.
yeah, 6-4.
Which
So
you
you
look
should
at
be
the other
leading your
teams.
division.
The other teams in that right now, it's the Cardinals at the top technically, which we'll see how long that lasts. The 49ers are falling apart at the seams. It seems like every week their major stars are just crumbling.
Which is
And then
crazy because the fact that you look up and you're like, the Cardinals are at the top, technically, I'm like, yeah, and that's the one team that the Rams like got their doors broken off them, where they put up 41 points in that game, and then the Cardinals last year did start slow and come on, but Cardinals were still battling with Miami. It was Tua's first week back, and I know everyone in Miami suddenly remembers how to play when Tua comes back. Um, I feel like the Cardinals went out there, but it was still a struggle versus Miami. Like this is a team that has looked dead at some points throughout the season.
talking about the Dolphins or the Cardinals, because
The
I think
Cardinal,
both
both
of
of
them.
these teams,
I was
both of
gonna
them
say
have
I
looked
think
dead.
both of them kind of apply there. The thing with the Cardinals that's super frustrating is like you see like their running game. Like James Conner is a fine running back. They should have like a solid running game, maybe like middle of the pack. And you have good weapons. Like Trey McBride is a good tight end. Marvin Harrison is a good receiver. Michael Wilson, solid receiver. Your offense should be a lot more efficient than what it is. But it's just every time they go down the field, it just feels like they have to fight for every yard. Then their defense can't stop anybody. So Cardinals, like, it's great that they got this win against the Dolphins, but I don't see them continuing their success. They should be by the end of this, they should be 7-10 as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and then this was Tua's game back, and we're on the Dolphins, we're on the Cardinals right now. We're talking about the AFC West, so let's start there. I mean, Kyler gets it done, I guess, in this game. The Dolphins frustrate me because I feel like Mike McDaniels is a great head coach, but great head coaches like Matt LaFleur, Jordan Love goes out, no problem. We get you covered. You know the guy who looked like a total incompetent bust, who had like more interceptions than completions in Tennessee, did Malik Willis, and he makes him look like a really competent starter. You have multiple teams where if their starter goes down, they still hold it together enough. Even Brett Huntley, when he was on the Ravens, like the Ravens were still competitive, but suddenly Raheem Mostert forgets how to run. Tyreek Hill disappears off the map. Like you can't figure out how to get Tyreek Hill touches and the ball at all and make him effective when Tua goes down. Like I kind of see why you paid him now because you're so inept without him. But how are you relying on a guy who really can't elevate your team to that next level in the playoffs? Like, I don't think he can elevate you over the Chiefs here at any point because you already, like, how many more weapons can you have on your offense? And it hasn't translated to the playoffs yet.
I think that they're going to be in a world of hurt when that contract fully sets in, and they got to look at Tyreek Hill closely. They got to look at Jalen Waddle closely, and then eventually, like Devon Achane, who for some reason he's got the same problem that Raheem Mostert had when he wasn't playing. Devon Achane was just not good, which I don't understand how one player can single handedly turn around that offense quite like that. we all know the quarterback position's valuable, but Tua's like you put him. I don't think you could put him top 10, but maybe like 11 through 16 at any given point. You can put him there. I don't think he should just completely change the outcome of that team completely. And I want to talk about Mike McDaniels too, about the point you made. Whether it's Matt LaFleur with Malik Willis, whether it's the 49ers in the years past, the Chiefs, the list goes on. The
Even the
Steelers, honestly, with
Rams
Justin
with
Fields
Baker
too.
and Carson Wentz last year.
Yeah, exactly. Like it just doesn't make sense how just Tua is that much of a game changer for the Dolphins where they can actually move the ball with it. I mean, I don't know. It's weird. I think that also kind of speaks to Mike McDaniels too, because we saw Mike Tomlin step in with Mason Rudolph and Kenny Pickett last year. Still had a winning season. We saw in years past. I know this is a long time ago, but Bill Belichick with Matt Castle, Bill Belichick with Jimmy Garoppolo and Jacoby Brissett. Like great coaches find a way to make it work. And Mike McDaniels, with how bad they looked, kind of worries me how bad they were without Tua.
Yeah, and it kind of just confirms why I know that this is just a team that's never going to make any noise in the playoffs. Like, if there's any year you're going to win your division, it was going to be last year. And you've taken the same strategy as the Rams here have done, but you just don't have it yet. Like, I don't think Tua's on the same level as Jared Goff. You don't have Tua on the level as even someone like Matthew Stafford there, who the Rams have, and Mike McDaniel's is kind of modeling his team after them, but he has no running game like to take the pressure off of any other quarterback when Tua isn't there, which is I feel like a massive hole for this team, and he has no running game in the playoffs. It's like only reliant specifically on speed. So like I just don't think this is a team that's ever going to translate to the playoffs, and I don't know how the Dolphins are really going to go forward with this contract because Tua does need Tyreek Hill. He does need Jalen Waddle, and he needs a good run game, and he needs a really good defense if he's going to go out there and carry a team. Like, he can't do what Josh Allen is doing right now. Like, as much as we've talked about Josh Allen on the show, like, he just isn't a guy who's going to go out there and carry a team.
No, and that's what I'm saying. Like this contract sets in, I believe, next year, and that's when you got to look at all the players you've brought in the last 3 years, whether it's Jalen Ramsey, Tyreek, whoever it is, you name it. These people who are getting older, like you can't keep Tyreek at that point when it comes to that contract where he's making $60 million. It's just no way you're going to make it work. You're already in cap hell last offseason. How is that going to get any better with Tua's contract?
Yeah,
So it's
and
going to
it's
be a
not.
nightmare.
Yeah,
It's not.
but we were kind of called this Dolphins team. I never really believed that they were ever going to do anything in the playoffs, and they haven't. Like last year was your year here. You kind of had a little bit of voodoo magic for a little bit in Miami versus the Buffalo Bills, where it seemed like it was a tough place for Buffalo and New England to play, and some of that magic is just going away now, even though you may still have it against the Patriots. Well, a team in that division that has this weird voodoo magic where even though, you know, this Jets are supposed to be really good this year, supposed to be emphasis, even though Greeny was putting them in the Super Bowl and there was all this propaganda. Yeah, propaganda around the Jets because how else do you
That's
explain
exactly
people
what the word.
putting this team in the Super Bowl and then you go to New England and then you're like, do you think this will be like a statement win, like a turning point? Like, I don't think any win versus the Patriots is a turning point. And I mean that. What would be a turning point would be a loss versus the Patriots. And that is what we saw. One of the ugliest losses. I might even say this is worse than losing 10-9 to the Broncos at this point. Because at least the Broncos have looked good. Bo Nix was the best rookie in October, 7 touchdowns to 1 interception, but Drake May died in this game, and Jacoby Brissett came in, and you still lost. We talked about, okay, well, maybe it was just Brady and Belichick with the Jets, but like they even got Josh Allen in New England last year, and now Aaron Rodgers. It's like there's a point where this team needs to stop losing games. You're not at the age where you can just say, "I'm going to run the table." Like you're not on Green Bay anymore. You just don't have that team. And then season on the line, so to speak, a divisional game. It matters when it comes to your standing in the playoffs if you're going for a wild card or a tiebreaker, and you lose to New England, who is about to mutiny on their head coach. What is
Yeah,
happening?
And this is not only that, it's also after they called their team soft. Let's not forget that Gerard Mayo also called his team soft like a week before. And this is kind of their way like, oh, actually, we're not so soft after all. Everything you mentioned, Drake May dies. And you would think that Patriots would just be dead on the water because we've seen how they've looked the last 7 weeks prior. Didn't look very good outside of the Bengals game. And then again, like you look at this game, if you just didn't even look at the score, you'd see, okay, Aaron Rodgers, 2 touchdowns, 110 QBR. Garrett Wilson had 100 yards. Brees Hall had 80. Like, okay, pretty good game. Rush for over 100 yards on the ground. So on paper, they should have won this game. But instead, the Patriots have a comeback. They win with Jacoby Brissett, and it's one of the most inexcusable losses of the year. This is a team that traded for a Hall of Fame quarterback, traded for a Hall of Fame wide receiver, already has good pieces on offense already, and you're supposed to have this highly touted defense, and you guys are 2-6. Of all the teams that we can talk about this week who had the most embarrassing loss of their season, this has got to be number one. Broncos game, like, all right, Broncos defense, great. No questions there. But now you look at this team that coming up, they face the Texans next week, which shouldn't be an easy win by any means. Now I'm not even convinced they can beat the Cardinals in a couple of weeks either. And then they face the Colts and the Seahawks. So there's like 4 games there that they have to win all of. And I don't know if they're going to win half of them. I don't know if they're going to win any of them at this point. This team is just an embarrassment at this point. I don't know if it's the Jets organization. I don't know what it is, but something's wrong in New York.
Yeah, and also you're a
It's just a
game.
complete mess.
Yeah. You're also a game away from being in the division lead, and you're like, it would be a great idea. After facing the only undefeated team in London, of all places, like we know that replicates an actual NFL game and doesn't have any external factors at all when you travel overseas to play a football game versus one of two undefeated teams, and then you lose to the Vikings, and you're like, yeah, we can just fire our head coach from the past few years and expect everything to be normal. Not only normal, we'll expect things to get better here. And even though we're not living up to expectations now, do you think you could have waited until the season was over of all the guys to get fired? Like, I don't think Robert Sala deserved to get fired. Like, he worked wonders with this team so many years with bad offensive coordinators, because part of Aaron Rodgers' deal was, I want the worst NFL coach in NFL history, not named Urban Meyer, to be the offensive coordinator here. Robert Sala was like, okay, I guess, because we all saw how that worked out for Russell Wilson in Denver, and now we see what Russell Wilson looks like when he has a competent head coach in Mike Tomlin. And then they're like, yeah, Robert Sala, even though we're a game away and could take the lead for the division versus the Bills this week, and lost within a possession and may have won if you were there, I think you should take a hike for the rest of the season. And it seems like mentally the Jets have already taken that hike since Robert Sala left. It's like, I don't think he was a bad head coach for this team over the past few years by any means, given the circumstances.
No, and their team looks worse since they fired him too. Their defense looks worse. Their offense looks worse. They got annihilated by the Steelers last week, and then this Patriots game, like the fact that the Patriots put up 25 points when their number one weapon was Keishon Butte. Give me a break, guys. This is not a game that you should have lost. And then now at this point, like you essentially have to run the table if you're going to even make the playoffs when you don't have a head coach, you don't have an offensive line, your defense is not as excellent as it was last year. It's like, what were you expecting to happen when you fired Robert Sala? And this was again against the Vikings who had played well. Bills lost, sure. That happens. That's a division game. Bills are a better team, sure. But these other games, inexcusable. The Broncos game, the Patriots game. These are all games where you look back on as you are now last in your division, even behind the Patriots, games that you should have won and you didn't. And now they don't have a head coach. Aaron Rodgers is going to be 41 in a month, and you're kind of screwed at the end of the day. You don't have a backup plan for him. I think your backup quarterback is Tyrod Taylor. It's like, what are you doing at this point? The Jets either have to continue moving down this pipeline where they're just going to trade all their picks so that they can be in the Super Bowl bubble. But the problem is they were never in the Super Bowl bubble. They weren't in the Super Bowl bubble before Aaron Rodgers, and they're certainly not afterwards. We said that when we got Aaron Rodgers, they're like, oh, maybe now they can win a playoff game. Not even that. They can't even do that with Aaron Rodgers now. He's coming off an Achilles tear, and he doesn't look like the same Aaron Rodgers at this point. The Jets, they looked at the Rams and they looked at the Bucks and they said, all we needed was Aaron Rodgers, and all of our problems are going to be fixed. And this is the fruit that has grown since. It's just embarrassment across the city of New York.
Yeah, should have gone to Tennessee. You know, should
Could have
have
gone
gone
to
to
Tennessee.
Tennessee. You could have taken Devontae Adams, had D Hop there. Maybe Derrick Henry would have stayed. Like that's where I wanted Aaron Rodgers to go, not the Jets, because I knew the Jets would always jet. And then when you're Robert Sala, like to what I said earlier, in emphasizing this, it's not fair to him that he had to pick, you know, Aaron Rodgers' dart buddy, Nathaniel Hackett, to be the offensive coordinator. And then he takes the fall for that. And this is a team, the Jets have gotten worse every single week Robert Sala hasn't been in the building. Like, they just look worse at everything, whether it's special teams, defense, and offense.
Yeah, because they have what was it their offensive coordinator? Who I don't even know who their head coach is at this point.
I think it's
It's
the
just some
DC. It's just some
yeah.
jabroni, though. It's not Antonio Pierce. And, like, yeah, it's not even like when it's the guy who stepped in for the Colts head coach. That was the Bucks head coach in the Super Bowl.
Bruce Arians.
Bruce Arians. Yeah, it's not like even when he stepped in, like I don't think this guy's ever coached an NFL team, and then you're not actively interviewing anyone to be your head coach. So like you're just gonna be bad now. Like your head coach matters.
Yeah, they brought in the head coach right now is Jeff Ulbrich, who he's basically just been a DC or an assistant DC since he started head coaching at this point, or since he started getting into there. I don't understand why even he was the coach either. It's just a complete mess. And the Jets, like, are we surprised by this? Not really. The Jets always just find a way. We talk about teams that have overcome curses, like the team like the Lions. Um, but the Jets just the problem is that they still have the same owner. They have the same energy in that building that was rotting last year when Aaron Rodgers went down. You draft Zach Wilson and then basically say like we're gonna have you sit behind Aaron Rodgers because you suck, and then he gets hurt. You try to trade him slash cut him, and then you just continue playing him after nobody wants him. It's like it's just this organization is just run like a circus at this point, and
Yeah.
I want off this ride. The circus that's just it's never ending there.
Yeah, it's kind of like when Kevin Durant went to the Nets instead of the Knicks. Imagine this Giants team with Aaron Rodgers and an actual, I don't know, an actual head coach. Replace Daniel Jones, keep Saquon Barkley, go all in for a Super Bowl. Like in that division of all divisions, like Philly, like being inconsistent. Dallas, you can get on any given Sunday. Washington wasn't Washington until now. Like if he went to the Giants last year instead of them paying Daniel Jones, I don't know. I think that would have been a much better decision. Like you want to battle through the AFC? Good luck. Good luck. The NFC, you should have stayed in the NFC first of all, and like
Yeah,
pick a better division who doesn't have a top five quarterback there.
yeah. I just Aaron Rodgers did not make the right choice, and it's obvious here. But we're talking about cursed franchises. Let's talk about a franchise that is no longer cursed. Let's go to a great game, which was the Lions game. A game that you look at the scoreboard, you're impressed by the 52-14 score. But then you look at the offensive numbers, you're like, where did all these points come from? Because they had a kick return touchdown. If I'm looking here, um, they only scored, I believe, 225 yards of total offense. Yet they put up 52 points. Another beatdown for the Lions. Any words here? I mean, Jared Goff, 12 of 15 again, continuing his immaculate percentages as well. Jameer Gibbs had a big run in this game. Sam Laporta had a big game. But a lot of this was special teams for the Lions.
Yeah,
Put up some
no,
big
I
numbers.
mean, this is just a testament, as we say every week on the show, but the Lions get better every single year at something, whether it was the offense being fully loaded last year and the defense starting to be competent, I think is fair for them. And this year, their defense is starting to look like an actual unit this year, an actual team that will be able to come up big in the playoffs and make the stop when they give them a cushion, don't have as massive of a collapse versus the San Francisco 49ers. And now, how else can we beat you? It's special teams. We already knew about the fake punts here, but This is just a team that if you're not sound with your football, if you're a sloppy team like the Titans, like they're just going to take advantage of you at every single level. And it's the sign of a well coached team, and it's a sign of an absolute wagon where their offense doesn't have to do too much. Oh, I don't know. David Montgomery, you get a touchdown. Jameer Gibbs, you get a touchdown. Only the best statistical duo in the league right now at running back. And I feel like people don't get how good this team are, where both Jameer Gibbs and David Montgomery are up there when it comes to yards and touchdowns at the same position, and they're on the same team. And now you add a defensive threat to that where you're getting turnovers consistently now, and then you add a special teams element to that, and then Jared Goff just being efficient, not turning the ball over, playing the best year he's ever played as a pro. Like, yeah, it's going to work, and it's a great sign that they're going to make the Super Bowl. That they just wagon this team effortlessly to 52 points, and it really didn't make it look that hard. It was pretty natural. Like, it came easy to them.
I'm looking at the numbers here. Khalif Raymond had 190 punt yards in this game.
That is
That's
wild.
insane. That's insane. He had a big 90-yard return, but still, even those 4 punts for 100 yards, that's absurd to me. And again, I'm looking at these numbers, and the anomaly for me watching this Lions game was like, how did they how did they do it? Because you look at the box score, right? They kicked one field goal. Okay, that's 3 points. Touchdown on the like. I just don't know for a team that only put up 225 passing yards and 225 total offense. Like, how did they do it? Plus, the Titans had the ball for 40 minutes and they scored 14 points. Like, I'm just that's the biggest mystery of this game. It's like, where did all these points come from? Because I don't understand it. How do you only have less than 300 yards passing? You put up 50 points. It just doesn't make sense. But defensively, they're great. Special teams, they're great. Obviously, they have a great running attack, and their weapons, stand amongst the rest. Their best receiver had 7 receiving yards. Amon-Ra had 2 catches. That's it, and that was all they needed to win this game by 40 points. I mean,
Yeah.
this team's insane.
Well, it's National Tight Ends Day. We have to get Brock Wright the ball. Everyone forgets about him like he's some scrub here. But every once in a while, I'm like, yeah, that's my boy. Brock Wright showing up, getting a touchdown.
We love Brock Wright. We love Brock Wright. Yeah, 2
There's a
tight
lot of
ends
love
because
for the
Samuel
tight
Porter
ends.
scored 2.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of love for the tight ends this week. Kyle Pitts got some love this week. Tucker Kraft had a huge week this week. Cole Komet
Yeah,
didn't have a big week, but it was a
Kyle Pitts
great
had a
showing.
monster week. Yeah,
Kate
Kyle
Otten
Pitts had a
had a good
monster week.
week.
Yeah, Kadon had what 3 touchdowns? It
Yeah,
looked like.
no, yeah, no, Kate Otten is that offense, and I picked the Falcons to win this game overall just because I thought, I mean, it was a close game when you had Evans and Godwin. I just think that this is a game Atlanta will be able to take advantage at this point in their career. I think they ran into a hungrier Seattle team, and they really were looking ahead to Tampa and getting this win, and Atlanta just showed up and they got behind this game, but it felt like Atlanta just had control throughout the entire game here. Baker Mayfield had his best efforts, but I just never had a feeling that Atlanta was going to lose this game. They were dominant at all 3 levels when they needed to. It looked like the first half was going to be a shootout, and then Atlanta just clamped Tampa down in the second half, made it tough for them to score. They get the touchdown at the end to make it look close, 34 to 21, 31 to 24, but it was really just a garbage time touchdown that Atlanta had already won the game. And this is what I thought that they should do. And then, I mean, the addition of Darnell Mooney gets better every single week. This was a guy wasting away in Chicago with Mitchell Trubisky. And now that he has Kirk Cousins here, he's a legitimate threat on offense. The 1-2 punch with Bijan and Algier is pretty good. And if you can get this out of Kyle Pitts, one of the scariest touchdowns I have ever seen. I mean, when you have to go to the replay to see, did he drop the ball right before the goal line? I'm like,
Oh
of
yeah,
course Kyle Pitts would do that
on National Tight Ends Day.
on
No, Kyle
National
Pitts has
Tight Ends
been
Day.
pretty good for them this year. This is a guy that he had a good rookie season. They anointed him as the best tight end prospect of all time. They took him ahead of Jamar Chase, and they probably could have used a wide receiver at the time. But I mean, this year he's on pace for 1,000 yards. So is Darnell Mooney. Joe, I mean, if Kirk Cousins can keep putting up his Hall of Fame numbers, who knows? But I mean, yeah, I mean, this Falcons team, there's a lot of things to like. Bijan had a good game. Kyle Pitts on national tight end say had 2 touchdowns. So a lot to like. And then for the Bucks, like I just feel like at this point, you lose Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. Like, how much more can they endure? Because their secondary's been hurt too. Their defense, they're getting banged up. It's like I think they'll still be competitive. They could still fight for that wild card spot, but I just don't think they can win their division at this point with how the Falcons are looking like.
Yeah, especially with how the Falcons looked in this game. It's going to be hard to overcome a two-game deficit now that they have the tiebreaker there. But I will give them credit. They played really well for a team missing their two best weapons on offense, not named Bucky Irving and Kate Otten. I mean, Mike Evans and Godwin are gone now, so Baker has played well. Mike Evans is probably going to come back after the bye. So if you can get him back and you can make a push for the playoffs, like you could still upset someone in the first round if you get a favorable matchup. So I definitely think they're a team that can go out there, maybe win a playoff game again if Mike Evans can come back, because the most impressive thing about this team all year has been the run game. They had a really good draft when it came to the offensive line. They replaced Ryan Jensen at center. And now they have, on a given Sunday, you have Rashad White, who has looked pretty well because he has some competition in the backfield now. But every time Bucky Irving, the gas station, touches the ball, something good happens. Anytime his name gets called, it's like a 20-yard pickup.
Yeah, no, we love Bucky Irving in this show. He had 9 carries for 44 yards, and right now, I mean, let me see what his yards per carry is. I feel like every time he touches the ball, he's got a 5.5 yard per carry right now for Bucky Irving. This is a guy that nobody even knew up until like week 2, and he's just gone on an absolute tear. He's got 400 yards passing as well, or receiving. I mean,
Yeah, he
so
has the first down average. You run it three times, you run it twice, you're going to get a first down.
yeah, so Bucky Irving. So I think the Bucks can stay afloat. I'll look at their schedule and see kind of how it breaks down, but I just think the Falcons are going to really start to gain control. This upcoming week, the Bucks face the Chiefs, and then they face the Niners. That might not be
Tough.
pretty for them. They don't really get any breaks in their schedule till December. So Bucks, I don't know about that. For the Falcons, this upcoming week they face the Cowboys and then the Saints. So
Munch.
those, yeah, that should be a good game. Those should be some good games with the Falcons. But let's talk about a team that we're kind of mixed on. We don't know how to feel about either of these teams, I suppose. But Eagles and Bengals. Eagles dominate the Bengals. I feel like you should talk about the Bengals before I do because the last 3 weeks their offenses just look bad, and I don't understand why. Everyone's full strength. Jamar Chase, perfectly healthy. T. Higgins, Joe Burrow. You look at his stats, aren't that bad, but their offense has just been cataclysmic. First, it was the Giants game where I was like, that doesn't look great, and then they faced the Browns. Browns are a tough defense, I suppose, but didn't put up too much there. And then this Eagles game, they just got smacked by Philly all around.
Yeah, no, they got smacked by a team from Philly who's kind of been hearing it a lot worse than most other teams, that I feel like should be getting a lot of heat. But for the Bengals, this game was just the one where, like, I think it's over for this season. I don't think this team can get to and win a Super Bowl this year. I mean, we've gone through this year after year after year where they start slow, then they pull it together. But you're going up against Philadelphia here, and your offense just couldn't keep up. You can't run the football here. I mean, your leading rusher had 32 yards here. You had under 100 yards rushing in this game, which is completely insane. And then Philadelphia just ran over your defense. It's not like, Jalen Hurts had the most dominant game in the world. He was just went out there, was really efficient, and then he had three rushing touchdowns on you. Like, he didn't run for that many yards, but anytime he needed to get the play, they have the tush push, which is the lamest play in football. However, it works every time for them, and he got three rushing touchdowns. So Philadelphia now fully healthy. I feel like this is the team that people kind of wrote off this year, but they were missing Devontae Smith and AJ Brown. Now that both of those players are back, this team has kind of looked like not the most as dominant as they were when they made the Super Bowl, but they look like a team that can win a playoff game against the team this year. Where the Bengals in this division, like this was going to be the game. Like, okay, are you on Pittsburgh's level this year or not? And now I have you as like the third or fourth team in your division, depending on how the Browns progress with Jameis, because I don't know. It just seems like Zach Wilson has, or Zach Taylor has lost this Bengals team because you have him on the sideline here, and he's been on the sideline with this team for how long now? And the Eagles moved on from Doug Peterson after he lost the Super Bowl now, and the Bengals, if they kept Marvin Lewis for that long, aren't going to move on from Zach Taylor. But it just doesn't seem like he's as effective as he's been the past few years as a head coach. And Joe Burrow's like, yeah, we just need to go like win 10 games and we should make the playoffs. Like, okay, that's fine, but what if you need to win more than 10 games to make the playoffs? Like, fluky things have happened here, and the Bengals just seem so nonchalant when you're a team that I believe in and have believed in the past few years, and you made it to a Super Bowl, but you didn't win the Super Bowl. And I
Yeah,
believe you can do it, but like how many weeks are you gonna be like, yeah, we can do it, and we'll start winning these games? Like, okay, how about you win them now? Like, what is stopping you from winning them now? Like Philadelphia, this isn't a team that should just run you over.
yeah, and not only that, but they still face the Ravens again. They face the Steelers twice. And the Steelers look like a wagon too. You have Cleveland with Jameis. That could be a problem too. Like your season, like you still have a lot of tough opponents ahead of you too. You face the Ravens in 2 weeks. Like let's not pretend like that's an easy matchup in any stretch of the imagination. So it's like you guys need to start winning games now. You need your defense to kind of continue. It's been the defense for the most part the last 3 weeks has played relatively well outside of this Eagles game, but just form it all together. Like you guys have the talent to be good. So that's why the Bengals are so frustrating to me. And that's when you do look at Zach Taylor's job. You're like, Zach Taylor, outside of that 1 year, you guys have started horrendously bad the last 3 years since. And it's like, where would they have been without those slow starts? If they didn't start,
Yeah.
where do they start? 0-4 this year? 1-4 this year. How much better would they, what positions would they be in at this point? If they didn't lose to the Patriots of all teams, like, it's just at some point you got to start looking at the coaching at this point because it's definitely not the players. We know what Jamar Chase is, we know what Joe Burrow is, and everybody else. At some point, you got to look at the staff. I don't think Zach Taylor's a bad coach, but if he's going to lose the locker room, you got to look at other options, especially with some of the coaches that are out there come this offseason.
Also, like you have read on the show how Joe Burrow has been hit more than Andrew Luck so far in his career, and Andrew Luck literally died and decided, came back from the dead, went out there and was like, you know what, I don't want to get crucified anymore on the football field. And now with Joe Burrow, I don't think he's going to do that, but he's been hit more than Andrew Luck has at this point in his career. And then the offensive line as a unit, you it's not for lack of spending on offensive talent. And now does that come down to identifying the talent on the offensive line, or does that come down to having the right head coach for the offensive line? And who is making that decision? Because you can't keep going out there and being like, oh, well, they had a dominant pass rush, so of course we lost. And we can't rely on Joe Burrow to make magic every single play, and some of this is on Joe Burrow. He needs to be better, but at the same time, how many years has this offensive line been together? How many more years are we going to spend money on this offensive line and it's just not going to do anything? Like why even spend money on it at this point when you could just spend money at other positions on defense? Like you spent money on it, but you haven't had the right coach to put it together yet. And at some point you have to look at that.
We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars that they've spent. Because let's not forget, they went out and they signed Orlando Brown and they signed the Ted Karrases of the world. Plenty of offensive talent that they've gone out and spot and spent money on, and nothing has come from it. So at some point, like that's why I look at Zach Taylor. I'm like, I just don't know how much longer it can go on, especially because the further they get away from that, it seems like the more they slightly regress too. And at this point, like I don't think they make the playoffs. I don't even know if they're gonna have a winning record this year at this point, from what I fear. So
Yeah,
I
the
just it's
problem is nothing's going to change though because it's Cincinnati, Ohio. It's a city, but it's not actually a city. And then you have a team that kept Marvin Lewis for like 2 decades and he never won a playoff game. We're fine with Andy Dalton getting to the playoffs and losing, and Joe Burrow and Zach Taylor took you to a Super Bowl. Like, this isn't like a forward thinking organization. They just got an indoor practice facility built. They just came into the modern NFL. This isn't a team that's going to be like trigger happy to fire a head coach. This is a team that's like, it's going to take like 4 or 5 years. It's going to take like 4 years of them missing the playoffs and Joe Burrow asking to leave first and giving them an ultimatum. Like, this isn't a team that's just going to jump the gun. So while it is an issue on this team, do I think it'll change? Probably not.
And that's a shame because we saw the other teams in that division play an absolute battle. I said on the show for this last 6 weeks, I said the Browns are going to be pinned to my worst top five until they start Jameis or bench Deshaun Watson. Now, some people may interpret whether this was a bad thing or a good thing, depending on where you are in the country. But Deshaun Watson is no longer at quarterback for this team for the rest of the year. And they finally started Jameis Winston, a guy that I've been praying, please give this man a chance. He is the best, worst quarterback of all time. And when he doesn't throw interceptions, he's a really good quarterback. Well, they beat the Ravens. They upset the Ravens. And not only did they upset the Ravens, Jameis marched down the field and had a clutch fourth quarter touchdown to win this game. You look at his numbers. First time that a Browns quarterback has thrown for 300 yards since the Deshaun Watson era. 3 touchdowns, 0 picks, 334. You like that? I love that. We saw more from Nick Chubb now. Nick Chubb still kind of getting his groove a little bit, but he did this without Amari Cooper. He did this National Tight Ends Day. David Njoku gets a touchdown, but just brings a bit of life for the Cleveland Browns a little bit. And then for the Ravens, I don't know. What is that to say? They lost to the Browns.
I mean, I said I know. I couldn't pick the Browns in this game, but I was like, I don't know. I don't think the Browns are going to get wagoned by the Ravens. I think this could be a close game. And the thing with Jameis Winston is when you play with Deshaun Watson, the guy's putting up Daniel Jones numbers, so it's not that fun to play with him. But say what you will about Jameis, you may not win with Jameis Winston, but you will win with Jameis Winston. And what I mean by that is if you're Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, can you complain that Jameis Winston got you paid? Can you complain that Jameis Winston helped you be a part of those 8 now 1,000 yard receiving seasons? I believe he had the most 1,000 yard receiving seasons. He had the longest streak in the NFL, and Jameis was a part of that. Can you hate him for throwing over 30 touchdowns in a season? He did have 30 interceptions, but Jameis Winston will feed you if you're a wide receiver, whether it's for better or for worse. He'll try and do it way more effectively than Will Levis. Will Levis is a poor man's Jameis Winston at this point, but like he was like, hey, Jerry Judy needs the ball because he was upset last week. And then he goes out there, gets Jerry Judy involved, throws some passes. David Njoku now, all the people who slept on him, he's gonna eat now. And then you just get Nick Chubb back. I mean, this is a Browns team where it's like Joe Flacco did have turnover issues with this Browns team last year, but at least the offensive game plan is there. So I think they're gonna be in a lot of shootouts. They're gonna be in a lot of fun games, and I think that's what's important for Cleveland Brown is Jameis will make you feel alive, or Deshaun Watson just makes this team dead and painful. It's like when you're in college and you have to watch like what's like one of those old black and white movies they make you watch. Oh, Citizen Kane. They're like, look at this film you want
Look
to
at this
watch, and
film.
you're like, I love film, I love football, but I don't like this. It's boring. It's drawn out, and it doesn't really sell tickets. And you saw how cheap the Cleveland Browns tickets were last year, and Deshaun Watson just made this team feel so hard to watch.
Yeah, and it's obvious to see how with all what they gave up for him. I will say though, I want to defend Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston is what he is, and he's been in the league for a long time now, so we know what we can expect from him. But I want to say like the last time we saw him start before he got hurt was 2021. If he doesn't throw interceptions, which I think Kevin Stefanski's a good enough head coach similar to Kevin O'Connell with Sam Darnold. Like, can we see a world where the Browns can win some games with Jameis Winston if he doesn't throw 30 interceptions? If he isn't the classic gunslinger that we know him to be, I think the Browns could be a dangerous team at this point. They're not going to make the playoffs at this point, unless if they go on an absolute Flackenheimer run again. But I think this Browns team is going to be a tough out, especially with you have the Browns defense, you have Myles Garrett on the other side, and then you have Nick Chubb who could come back into form, hopefully. You have Jameis Winston who can fling the ball down the field. If that doesn't result in interceptions, that results in just massive bombs, that could be a scary team to face at this point. I think Jameis right now, he's got one game under his belt, so I'm not going to over exaggerate, but this could be an interesting game. I think Jameis
Yeah.
could be the lifeblood for this Browns team.
Also, when we were like, where'd this pass rush and defense go for Cleveland? I don't know. Suddenly, Jameis is at quarterback, and Lamar is on the ground every other play here. They're containing Lamar. They had a really great comeback versus the Ravens, but I believe it was in Baltimore last year. So the Browns and the Ravens have played each other tough in this game, and I'll give credit to the Browns, and I think they'll definitely mess up someone's day and take someone out of the playoffs with them. Maybe it's they stop Baltimore or Pittsburgh from winning the division at the end of the year. And then for the Ravens, though, it seemed like Lamar and Jameis Winston were competing for the amount of dropped interceptions in this game. Like there
Yeah.
were so many passes that Lamar just left out there. When I rewatched the game, it was like I believe I counted like 8 dropped for Lamar and it was like 6 for Jameis. It was like over 14 interceptions that could have been had in this game between the two quarterbacks. And you average that out, but like Lamar should have had like 4 picks in this game, and some of them were pretty bad. Like they were in the corner's hands repeatedly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough to know. I mean, for Lamar, I don't think he played his best game by any means. They were able to relatively contain Derrick Henry. Um, Zay Flower had a decent game, but overall, I feel like this Browns team is just kind of a tough out for this Ravens team. They come to play every time they face them. But I mean, neither guy threw interceptions at the end of it, so I guess that's cool. But could have been a lot uglier game for Lamar if things go the other way.
Yeah, and I think you're owed one of those games as a quarterback. I feel like every quarterback has a bad game. It's just how bad is that game? And you lost to a divisional opponent 24-29, so nothing to freak out about. You still look dynamic in this game. Sometimes it's just not your day versus a divisional opponent. But you did get a third receiver on your team, and now with Rashad Bateman's stock going through the roof right now, with Zay Flowers stock going through the roof right now this season, Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson being an absolute wagon, they're like, you know what? Let's add the final piece on and finally replace Nelson Aguilar. And they go out there and trade for Deontay Johnson from the Panthers. Let another trade where Panthers go out there. We need a receiver. Like, okay, let's trade him away now. Let's trade him away. Like Deontay Johnson knew what he was getting into by going to the Carolina Panthers, and the Panthers need wide receivers. So it's like you're already trading him as soon as he gets signed this season. Like that's a red flag for Carolina again already. And then Baltimore takes advantage of the situation. All you need him to do is be your 3 and replace Nelson Aguilar with Deontay Johnson. Now he's your 5th option on this team. If you go with what Likely and what Mark Andrews have been consistently doing, Mark Andrews now having a touchdown the past few games.
Yeah, Ravens adding Deontay Johnson, that definitely helps. What's funny enough about this trade, did you see the full package for what they gave up for him? They
Yeah, the
traded
lead
a
up to the
fifth round
first.
pick. They traded a fifth round pick and they got a sixth round pick back. So they basically just moved back a couple of slots and got a good wide receiver. I would say Deontay Johnson is a solid 2 at this point. And for this team, he's probably going to be he'll probably be the 2, but you could argue the 3, depending on how Rashad Bateman plays. But they get him for nothing, which I think this is the biggest win. You basically trade down in the draft and get Deontay Johnson for the next 8 weeks. It's kind of a win-win, especially after you saw the Chiefs trade for Josh Uche from the Patriots for nothing, and obviously they got D Hop as well. And after you saw the Bills get Amari Cooper, You go out and get somebody for dirt cheap that you can just add to your team who's good life plug. I know he historically has drop issues, which I don't think is going to benefit them too much, but played well for the Panthers. I think that he signs with them. There wasn't a lot of interest there to go to the Panthers, and then now he gets to go to the Ravens. So Deontay Johnson is definitely a happier man now than he was a few days ago. So credits to him, but good God,
Yeah,
the Panthers.
yeah, the
What I ask
Panthers,
now is
and
like,
then
can you trade Adam Thielen then? If you're going to trade Deontay Johnson, can you just trade Adam Thielen too? I understand he's older. Maybe he's not as an attractive piece, but like, get him out of Carolina too. I mean, you guys aren't going to win another game. You might as well free them while they still have a chance at production, you know?
yeah, because you go out there, and then the Broncos go out there and they beat you. The Broncos hit that spread. They had the biggest spread of the week versus the Carolina Panthers, which we went over in the preview, and they ended up hitting it. I believe the spread was 11 points for the Broncos coming into this game, and
12
they
and a half.
covered. They hit 14 points, took them to cover the points this week and the spread, and go out there, you get a two touchdown win versus a bad team. I think it's a fine win for the Broncos. You go out there, beat a team you're supposed to beat. Bo Nix now has the best numbers of any rookie QB in October, where he's only thrown one interception this month, and he has 7 touchdowns. And for all the people saying that he could still be the best rookie long term this year, or the best rookie in the draft, like, this is what we expect from a veteran quarterback coming into the league and finally starting to join the NFL at the ripe age of 40. Like, of course, he should be the best rookie in the draft this year.
Of course he is. I mean, he's the Mac Jones of this draft. He's been playing for like a decade in college, so how much does that switch over? But all jokes aside, I mean, he had a good game, just what you would expect him to do. He threw touchdowns, which I feel like his early part was just kind of using his legs to make the teams hurt, but now he's starting to throw touchdowns. He's starting to throw the ball down the field more. I think there's starting to be more trust with Sean Payton. So, I mean, I don't think he's going to be as good as Caleb Williams or Jaden Daniels, but step in the right direction. I think the Broncos should be happy, especially with where they are, with where we thought they would be. So, I say good game for Bo Nix, good game for their running game as well. Cortland Sutton had a good game as well, but at the end of the day, I mean, Bryce Young's out there. Bryce Young looked like Bryce Young. You know what I mean? Like, just you should have won this game the way you did. So credits to them. They covered the spread. So can't say anything bad about the Broncos here.
No, can't say anything bad, but like, did you really need to cut Russ to do this season? Like, is Bo Nix like really gonna be your franchise guy that's gonna compete with Patrick Mahomes over the next few years, or could you have been a little bit worse? And if you were worse with Russell Wilson again this season, then you have someone like a Shador Sanders coming out, or Arch Manning in the future, who could follow up Peyton's footsteps and play with you. Like, is this really like Bo Nix is going to be your guy that you're going to win a Super Bowl with, or is he just going to be a Dak Prescott here?
I think more like the Dak Prescott here. I don't know. Like, especially with how Russ played on Monday night, I just don't think it was necessary to do what they did. And I'm happy to talk about that game next if you'd like. Just the Steelers
Yeah,
game.
they
Um,
humiliated him for no reason.
yeah, and let's be honest. I mean, his first year in Denver was ugly, and there's no way to slice it. But last year, you look at his numbers, was pretty fine. He was definitely more of a check down merchant. Definitely didn't push the ball down the field. That's also part of the scheme that they had too. So that's also kind of on Sean Payton too. But he goes to Pittsburgh on a 1 year deal. Not a lot of expectations. We didn't even know if he was going to start at any point. Then he comes into training camp, gets hurt. Justin Fields comes in. Justin Fields plays well while he's there. Then Russell comes in. A lot of flack from Mike Tomlin for starting Russell Wilson, but I think at this point, if you're looking at two veterans who left and joined new teams, Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson looked better this game than Aaron Rodgers has looked all season. He was throwing balls down the field. He made some darts, especially in the second half, really pushed the ball down the field. Huge game from Calvin Austin. But Russ looks good. And I just think that whole embarrassment train that we went on with Sean Payton last year was completely unnecessary. I don't think Russell Wilson deserved that by any means. He's a professional. I just think they kind of did him dirty, but this is kind of his revenge tour. And I think this Steelers team, with how great that defense was, with how DJ Watt and Alex Highsmith were just wrecking havoc on Daniel Jones, the defense is a Super Bowl winning defense. And if Russell Wilson can play like relatively vintage Russell Wilson minus the mobility, this team can win a Super Bowl. Now, whether they beat the Chiefs or Ravens is tough, but this is definitely a team that should be in that bubble at this point.
Yeah, and if they're able to add another guy to this defense at the trade deadline that is like the Von Miller or DeMarcus Ware pickup, like this could be a defense that's as good as what Denver was the year that they carried Peyton Manning to the Super Bowl. If they can turn it up another level here, and I do think that they have that other level to go because Joey Porter Jr. is having another really strong year this year, and it seems like Russell Wilson is actually like competent now, and he has been able to run a little bit. And with Justin Fields, he played well. But as you said earlier before the season, we've seen enough from Justin Fields, and it got to a point with Justin Fields where the passing game just didn't seem natural enough for him, where it just didn't look like he was a good quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, he was a great player on offense for them. Don't get me wrong, he was a better threat than Kenny Pickett, but he didn't have a rhythm to him when they were on offense. Where it feels like when Russell Wilson's playing, it feels like this offense has an actual rhythm. He feels like an actual quarterback who knows what he's doing, who can make reads, who can make some really good throws downfield. I mean, some of the throws that him and George Pickens are connecting to, where George Pickens is someone who's got a lot of flack, but Russell Wilson just puts it there. And there's a play where I think Van Jefferson made the catch where Eli was just like, throw it away. And then he makes this incredible throw where it's right under the defender diving onto the ball. And you're seeing some of those out of Russ this year. And it seems like he feels like for the first time in his career, he feels like he has something to prove where in high school he's the best player, in his college division he's the best player when he walks on the field, where kind of went through it. And it seems like he's coming up this year. And we talked about, well, with Big Ben, the Steelers were bad, so if you have a guy who can throw, they should be better, right? And then Kenny Pickett was like, no, 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 somehow a guy who can't throw past 15 yards is going to be better than me just because he's old, wily, and smart in Ben Roethlisberger. And now that Kenny Pickett is gone, someone who got a lot of flack, Najee Harris, well, if your quarterback can't throw touchdowns, what's the defense supposed to go to next? Stopping the run. And Najee Harris is someone who's had a lot of pressure on him, where the Steelers have had to lean on the running game the past few years. And now this year, it seems like it's actually opened up, and it seems crazy to say, but I think the addition of Cordero Patterson was huge for that running back room, because he had a game where he had a big game, and then it seemed like it became a competition with him, Jalen Warren, and now Najee. And now you can use all of those guys in the passing game, and suddenly Pat Firemouth is looking like the guy we thought he would be when he was drafted. Speaking of tight ends weeks,
Mhm.
same with George Pickens. So this team is going to be a problem, and I think they'll be dangerous in the playoffs and have a puncher's chance versus any team in the league.
Yeah, I think defensively alone, I think they can disrupt any of these teams we mentioned, whether it's the Ravens, the Chiefs, the Bills, the Texans, whoever it might be. Their defense alone can do that. That defense, even just looking at it on paper, that's got to be the best defense in football. And then Najee Harris, a guy who, as you mentioned, does get a lot of flack, had a great game against the Giants. And then again, like Russell Wilson, you mentioned it a little bit here. It really hasn't been since those early Seattle days that he had something on his chest. He was a fourth round pick, as Eminem has alluded to in a couple of songs. But after I think the Super Bowl, especially after the interception, it felt like he was just kind of the leader of that Seahawks team after that Legion of Boom goes down, gets a little cocky, gets a little, in over his skis. Then he goes to Denver demanding to have his own office. And I think the Denver experience is important for him because I think he really needed to humble himself a little bit. And the public humiliation, him getting cut, him almost being completely out of the league at one point, definitely humbled him. So now when he goes into this Pittsburgh situation, a situation where they just need him to be a solid quarterback, I think now this is the perfect opportunity for him to have his career. Now I am curious now, like if Russell Wilson wins another Super Bowl, I think obviously that puts him in the Hall of Fame, but like how does that change his legacy now if he does win number two? That's a very big ring for him at that point.
It's really weird. It really depends on the context of it and how that Super Bowl goes. It's like, did he win the Super Bowl or was he along for the ride again? Like, is this a Matt Ryan situation? Is this a situation like Ben Roethlisberger where he still has to get into a shootout and put up numbers to win the game, or does the defense absolutely wreck every team that they play? So it's like, what was his impact in those games? I think will have the biggest impact on how it would change his legacy. Because I do think there's a chance that they win the division because they do have an easier schedule than the Ravens, and they beat the Ravens twice. So I do think that they're going to split with Baltimore this season. I think Baltimore's going to win in Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh's going to win in Baltimore. Like both of these teams relish making the other fans cry, and both of these teams go harder in the other team's stadium here. So I think they're really going to push Baltimore because now Baltimore's lost 3 games. Pittsburgh's in the driver's seat for the division. So if you split with them, you're already in a good spot. And Baltimore knows they can't overcome the Chiefs now for home field because Patrick Mahomes is playing the worst football he could possibly play. And it really doesn't matter at all for the Kansas City Chiefs. And they have easy wins at every turn in their division where, the Ravens could lose 2 more games in their division.
Yeah, I mean they already lost to Cleveland. They could lose to the Steelers and the Bengals. Meanwhile, the Chiefs have Gardner Minshew, which they faced this game. I felt like the Chiefs in this game were just kind of sleepwalking. I mean, Mahomes played a better game than he's played the last few weeks, but overall, they didn't do anything super sexy in this game. I mean, Kareem Hunt got a touchdown, didn't get too much done on the ground either. Travis Kelsey had a big game on National Tight Ends Day, so that's cool. But ultimately, it just came down to their defense, and just there was never a point in this game where I felt like the Raiders were going to win this game by any means. Just felt like the Chiefs were just kind of sleepwalking through it all, and they got the win. So I guess that's what matters. But I never at any point was I worried that they were going to lose to the Raiders.
Yeah, no, there's really no point with the Raiders this season. They're just dead now. There's no reason to talk about them. Like how many different ways can we say that the Raiders are a disappointment this year? But I feel like it's flying under the radar, and sometimes the media, and us even can get caught up in a situation where we see someone like Antonio Pierce and we're like, the Raiders, well, now they have to hire them as their head coach next season. And I don't know if it's Antonio Pierce's fault that they suck, but they have pretty much the same team as last year, and they don't have any of the tenacity. They're not winning close games, and you let Josh Jacobs go. Why? Like, who else are you paying on your team where you need to let Josh Jacobs walk, who's playing really good football, not even just really good football, game changing football for the Cleveland or for the Green Bay Packers? Like
Yeah,
someone who's
I
going
mean,
out there getting 120 plus yards and 2 touchdowns. Like, you don't think you could use that guy on your team and your situation would be completely different if you had him?
well, instead they went the Alexander Madison route, where 14 carries for 15 yards is what you can expect from him. Um, See, this is like the thing with the Raiders this year is I never expected them to be great. I expected them to be like 7-10, which maybe they can still do, but I doubt it. But you're rocking Minshew and you're rocking Aiden O'Connell. I feel like at this point you shouldn't want to win any more games if you're the Raiders. At this point, you want to look at like a Shador Sanders. You want to look at whoever might be available for you. Carson Beck, if he's available, like you should want to look at the quarterback position for next year, and you shouldn't want to win games this year at this point because you're still competing with the Patriots and Panthers for number one, and your team's bad enough that you guys honestly could not win another game, and I wouldn't be surprised. So it's kind of like a pack it up and let the season ride sort of situation for the Raiders because you have talent. Brock Bowers has proven to be a really good tight end already one of the top tight ends in the league. You still have some talent there. I mean, Jacoby Myers is a fine wide receiver, but at this point, like you got to think about next year. And I feel like the Raiders at this point should just look to next year, pack it up, lose some games, play competitive, I suppose. But really, you're looking to next year for this team because they really need their franchise QB.
Yeah, no, they do. And that's definitely a good point because you're looking around and Dave Canales is trying to prove something in Carolina. The Patriots have their quarterback in Drake May here. At least they think they do. So I don't think they would go out there and necessarily draft one. And then another team we could have been competing with was the Cleveland Browns, but they're probably going to win some games with Jameis. And the Giants will probably win some games with Daniel Jones unless they decide to just bench him and tank. And then you're looking at like, well, the Jets are still also going to try and lose games. So you could really be the legitimately only major team tanking right now because you look at all the other bad teams, like maybe outside of Tennessee, like not a ton of other bad teams are looking for a quarterback, or they'd have to at least trade up for one. So you could definitely get the upper hand right now for the first overall pick.
Yeah, I'm looking at the teams here. Like the Giants, yeah, Giants definitely need a quarterback. Um, that
A
was a
good
we
one
didn't
too,
even talk
yes.
about when we were talking about the Steelers game. We didn't even talk about the Giants and Daniel Jones. I feel like it's kind of a beaten record at this point, and we'll talk about them in the worst top five for sure. But Daniel Jones just on cue, fourth quarter needs a drive, interception. Like we saw it coming, and then he had a fumble in this game as well. Like, just can we just
You
give up on the Daniel Jones experiment already?
you
It's a
know what I
failure.
wanted to say about the Giants in this game? Outside of Daniel Jones being a failure, not throwing a touchdown, Desmond Ritter having more touchdowns in MetLife over the past 2 years than he does. But it seems like the Giants just get put out there on Monday Night Football for the slaughter, and Eli Manning just has to sit there and watch it. Like, when you have him on your broadcast, I don't. We've had some terrible games on Monday Night Football. Can you get the Giants against the team that they could beat potentially? I know you don't have a lot of options. Maybe you put them on in week one when Daniel Jones is playing passable football to some analysts, putting up 18 points. Oh, he's playing well. I didn't know getting under 18 points on offense was meant you were a great quarterback, and somehow wasting away Malik Neighbors. And now Eli Manning every year on Monday Night Football just has to watch the Giants get killed. Well, either it's always the worst guess too, because it's like Tracy Morgan, who was like insane. Apparently, he wasn't on drugs, but if he wasn't, he could have fooled me. And then he has LL Cool J this week, and we get Peyton trying to rap. We get Eli trying to rap, and it's just like New York has the cringiest guests too. It's like that's when you have like your Jimmy Kimmels on, like John Hamm, like
Yeah, it sucks. I think like every year in the NFL, there's always one team that has way more primetime games than they deserve. And the Giants every year are one of those teams that just has a bunch of primetime games. Remember the first year with the Broncos with Russ, they had 7 primetime games, and every
yo,
game was like, I don't know if you've ever seen Clockwork Orange in the theater when his eyes are like this. That's what it's like watching the Giants on primetime. That's what it was like watching that Broncos team. But they've
Niners
already
Broncos on
had
Sunday Night Football.
have they already had 3 primetime games already? And they have more primetime games. They're shipping them to London in 2 weeks, and then they have more primetime games later
I
on.
think
They
they're
have
going to
a
Germany.
yeah, and then they have a Thanksgiving game because that's what we want to see on Thanksgiving.
Who are
Um,
they playing on Thanksgiving?
the Cowboys. So,
Good
you know,
God. Maybe
who
they could
knows?
win. Who knows?
Maybe. I just it sucks because Malik Neighbors is a stud, and that's like we know that already so quickly. And Tyron Tracy has been a good win for them. So like their offense isn't that far away. Honestly, I'd rather them just start Tommy DeVito again because Tommy DeVito has more touchdowns over the last 2 years than Daniel Jones does. He's been more effective. They have more of a lifeblood with him. There's certain quarterbacks that just suck the life out of their team, and I feel like Daniel Jones is the epitome of that. We can shout out to Sean Watson. We can shout out a number of other people, but he sucks the life out of the Giants. Just bench him, give up on him. Go ahead, even Drew Lock at this point. Start him. Daniel Jones has not scored a touchdown at home in 2 years. That should be enough. That should be enough when hockey players are outscoring him at MetLife. You got to start looking at it for now. Like Daniel Jones is gone. Start for the future. Start looking at Shador Sanders and just get over like break up with Daniel Jones. This has been the longest. This has been the Marvin Lewis of quarterback situations. Gone on way too long. There's been no success, but it just keeps pouring out. We're in year 7, I think, at this point. Drafted in
At least he
2019.
Yeah,
Six
at least
years?
Daniel Jones won a playoff game. Marvin Lewis never did that.
I think that speaks more to the Vikings losing that game than them winning that game. But I guess that's the point. But that was the only good year. And that wasn't even a good year. That was 9-7-1 with the most fluky one-score games ever. And ever since then, they've been terrible. And before then, they were terrible. Just give up on Daniel Jones. It's been 6 years now, and nothing has
Yeah.
progressed. He's only gotten to be the same quarterback he was as a rookie. Give up. It didn't work.
Yeah, I thought Brian Daboll was Bill Belichick, though. That's what I heard, at least. The whole first year he was with the Giants. Like, oh my God, we got the next Belichick here. Your stupid New York voice.
Hmm.
We
New
have the
York ruins
best
everything.
pizza. It's thin.
Yeah, we have the best pizza. Yeah, well, they don't have the best baseball team either, but we can talk about that later. Uh, the Giants. I just hate the city of New York, honestly. I really do.
It's
I'll pull up
crazy
my
that New
bias.
York is a city to me. Like, it's a wild place. Like, you just put, I mean, nonstop high rises and skyscrapers on an island there, and then everyone wants to live like surrounded, compact in a server in like the most bustling city. The streets are constantly packed. Like, credit to the people who live there because that takes a enormous amount of hustle. Like, you live there, and then they go up to the country. They're like, "Oh my god, a deer!" With like no connection with nature at all. It's just all cities, high rises, people everywhere, massive events, construction nonstop.
You know, I've lived in the city, in multiple cities now, and New York is the only city where I feel like a country bumpkin going into that city because it sucks the life out of you. It's so much just whether it's lights, whether it's bad driving, whether it's what you mentioned with the high rises stacked on top of each other. Like you look up in New York and you see not one, not two, you see like 15 skyscrapers that are stacked on top of each other. You just feel like a rat when you're there the whole time, no matter where you are. And it's also huge. Like there's so much of New York. Like it's just it sucks the life out of you. By the time you leave New York, you're gasping for air. You're like, thank God I'm out of here. It's time for me to go to fucking Rochester, New York, and see some trees again. For fuck's sake.
Yeah. I mean, like, upstate New York is cool too, but like, New York City's just like, it's literally where the term rat race came from you. And like, all the like high rises there, it just like feels like you're plugging yourself into a server. So it's like, you talk about the Matrix, like, okay, yeah, New York is just a simulation that got out of control.
Yeah, it definitely feels like a rat race there. But Giants suck, Jets suck, Yankees suck. The whole New York is just a sports town. It's just perpetual chokers, as
The
far as I'm
Knicks
concerned.
are gonna choke again.
Yeah, I mean they're winning in the bottom of the eighth currently, but they're down 0-3 to the Dodgers. Aaron Judge, I know you're not a big baseball guy, but Aaron Judge has, I got to look at the exact numbers, but in this playoff series, he's batting .083, which is, if you bat 300, you're doing well. If you're batting below that, you're not doing as well. .083, not even batting 100 in this series, has 60% of his at bats resulting in strikeouts, has one hit in the World Series through 3 games. I'll see how he's doing in this game, but Aaron Judge has been just horrible for him. And the Yankees just
Yeah.
do what they always do. It's just choke in the postseason when it matters.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to hate someone more than Jose Altuve, but Aaron Judge is just one of those players. Like, yeah, he puts
He
up
should have just went to.
historic numbers in the season, in the regular season, I guess. But like, when it's like a pretty close World Series, and you're just don't perform up to your standard or even elevate your game, where David Ortiz, I feel like any World Series he was in, anytime he got the opportunity to perform, like, he rose to the occasion and outperformed what he usually does. Maybe some of that was in a little bit of that was in the steroid era, but like the 2013 and 2018 World Series that they won, like, David Ortiz rose to the occasion down 0-4, and then it's kind of like who's the Clayton Kershaw is the pitcher who just took him forever to get him over the hump.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And now the Dodgers have They signed a bunch of players. Everyone's crying because the Dodgers signed a bunch. They signed Shohei. They signed the biggest pitching prospect. They signed pretty much everybody. They got Freddie Freeman too. Like everyone hates the Dodgers. Dodgers, I think, I don't know. People are bitching about them buying their things, but they've been doing that forever. I mean, that's what the Dodgers have done. The Yankees, the Red Sox have done that. The Cardinals have done that. Like it's not new for baseball trophies to be purchased. It's been like that forever now. Hell, even the Astros did that. So like people can stop complaining about that. But I just think it's one of those things like the Yankees are like the Cowboys of the MLB, where it's like it's inevitable that eventually we're going to see them just choke. And now we're seeing it in real time. Aaron Judge, looking at his numbers in the postseason, he's 6 of 43 with 20 strikeouts. So that's good for, I think that's quick math, like a buck 80. So he's just choked. And if you look at his other postseason numbers, he's also choked. So something's never changed for the Yankees. And I was begging for them not to win this series, and it looks like they're not going to.
Yeah, I hope they don't because I just hate the Yankees and the Astros. Um, but yeah, it just seems like with baseball, with people complaining, they're like, "Oh my God, the two teams that spent the most money are gonna win the World Series." I'm like, "Yeah, isn't that how your sport works? Isn't every other team aware that they don't have a salary cap as well? So it's like if you're gonna be willing to spend the money, then go ahead and spend the money. Like, okay, like." That makes sense,
The
but
funny
we
part
also
is
see
everyone was
teams like
praying for Mets and Yankees. The Mets and Yankees were everyone was banking on Mets and Yankees in the postseason. The Mets have the highest payroll in baseball by like $100 million, and they're the same team as the Dodgers are, except for the Dodgers are just a little bit smarter. It's like just that's what baseball is. They buy their World Series, just like the NBA is kind of the same idea too. You go and get a couple of stars, you fill them with a roster. It's like that in those two sports respectively. I think
yeah.
the NBA has done a better job of like preventing that in the last couple of years, but MLB has always been that way. It's not new.
No, it's not new. But you still see teams like Cleveland, make some noise once in a while and get to a World Series. See teams like the Kansas City Royals go out there, but like it's how your sport works and, baseball's lame. So baseball's like a sport that doesn't need more lame rules. Like I wish less sports had a salary cap. So you already have these weird dumb gentleman rules similar to golf. Where it's like, "Oh, don't look at your home run or we'll empty out the bullpen on you." It's like, okay, sure.
Yeah, baseball's got a
I'll walk silently around the bases. Well, you can't walk around the bases because that's disrespectful. But if you run, it's also disrespectful. So it has to be the perfectly timed right jog, and then no one will get mad when you hit a home run. It's like, really? A bunch of dudes getting paid millions of dollars are sensitive about someone looking at their home run. It's so lame.
it is lame, but I do have a soft spot. That was my first sport, but I do understand why people do not love that sport because it is a very annoying sport. They do everything wrong that a sports league could do. So we live with it, I suppose. I guess we could stay on the LA New York timeline. The Chargers, they got the win against the Saints. The Saints have now lost 6 consecutive games. Uh, beat them down 28-6 following a loss. Does this give you any more optimism for the Chargers, or they just ran into a team that is literally falling apart, seam by seam?
Yeah, this is a team that's literally falling apart. And like, this was a game where you're like, I can't pick either of these teams coming into the game. I believe with the Chargers because they had just lost to Arizona and the Saints, and now Arizona went out there and beat Miami. But I still think the Chargers are a middle of the pack team that is gonna at the end of the season be slightly above that, but you're still just in the middle battling for a wild card spot here. You're not going to win your division here. I don't think this team can win a playoff game, but are you building for next season? Yes, we're seeing some good signs from this team, but still have some ugly losses in this game. You went out there, you beat the Saints. This is a team that just got annihilated on Thursday Night Football, and no one knew what was going on at all. And it's a team that's falling apart with injuries, pretty much just calling up anyone who's available to play from Canada. They called whoever's playing in Australia. They checked South Africa on this team. I mean, the Saints need players. I mean, they even considered putting Colin Kaepernick in at wide receiver. That's how desperate the Saints are at this point. So I think this is a game like, yeah, the Chargers, you got 26 points, but like, can we break 30 with Justin Herbert? Like, you paid him all that money and you can't even score more than 30 against this team.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I don't know. The Saints now have the longest losing streak in football with 6 games, even surpassing the Carolina Panthers. So
Wow.
Saints are they could very well just whether they don't win another game or they win maybe another 1 or 2 games. This is a team. If I were them, especially if they're not in love with Derek Carr, maybe that's another team that looks for a quarterback this year. As ever since Drew Brees, it just feels like they've been trying to patch that band aid. Now's a perfect time to go into rebuild, fix that salary cap finally, and just start all over. Because it feels like they've been just trying to keep the momentum going the last 5 years, and it's failed miserably for them.
Yeah. A team that had a little bit of momentum going was the Jaguars. It was a tough game versus the Packers. Jordan Love gets injured in this game. Hopefully, he has a speedy recovery, but no problem because 4 for 5. Malik Willis comes in, has a touchdown. They average the exact same amount of yards. Both Jordan Love and Malik Willis averaged 14 yards per attempt in this game, and then had a huge rushing game from Josh Jacobs where he carried you with 25 carries, 127 rushing yards, and 2 touchdowns in this game. And this was a really good game from the Packers because you go on the road against a hungry Jacksonville Jaguars team that's trying to find themselves. And then I thought the Packers again proved they can weather the storm with Malik Willis. I mean, we talk about how Miami and other teams struggle to get a backup quarterback, but Matt LaFleur figured it out with Malik Willis. And if Jordan Love's going to be out a few weeks, I think the Packers can stay afloat and get to another wild card game. I don't think they're going to beat the Lions out for the division this year, but for the Jaguars, I thought if any loss was a super positive loss for them, I thought it was this one. I thought Trevor started to actually find a real rhythm. He got into a shootout. Now with Robinson on their team, it seems like they actually hit on a wide receiver and Tank Bigsby is coming alive. It's like this performance from them gave me hope with the Jacksonville Jaguars where I saw some holes start to creep up with the Colts and the Texans. So I think the Jaguars are a team that can string together a few wins here. They just ran into a team that was better than them at this point in the season. But I thought this game, like, if any loss is a positive, like, I thought this was a all around well played game for the Jaguars. Like, we haven't seen a ton of bad teams go out there and score 27 points the way they did versus Green Bay.
No, you're right. Especially, I think of all games this season, I feel like this is the game that, even though it's a loss and even though it doesn't help their playoff chances, it's still a game that you can leave like, okay, Tank Bigsby's been well while Travis Etienne's banged up. Your rookie, you clearly hit on him. And then you played competitively against a Packers team that is right there in the Super Bowl bubble in the NFC. Like, honestly, it comes down to like if you could stop Josh Jacobs, then maybe the game looks a little different. But I think this is a good loss for the Jags if there's such thing. So give credit to them. And then also like again, Matt LaFleur with what he's done with Malik Willis to this point this year is just insane, especially with what we saw in Tennessee. So good game for the Jags and Packers pull it out despite losing Jordan Love. I don't think Jordan Love's supposed to be out for too long. I believe he has a groin injury, so we'll status that. But looks like he is day to day based on a report from NFL Networks. So he should be back, but good win for the Packers and good win for the Jags, or good loss for the
Yeah.
Jags, I should say.
Yeah, Packers is just going to be a team that I think it's going to be a wild card team, but they're going to go out there and light it up against whoever they play here. Not sure who that's going to be yet, but probably be a good matchup. Probably if they're the top wild card team, if I had to guess right now, you're probably going to get like something like Packers Rams in the first round if the Rams come back and win the division. Maybe the Falcons in the first round. So I think they can definitely get back to the divisional round here.
Yeah, I think they can too. Speaking of team that could go back to the divisional round, the Texans, they narrowly beat out the Colts. They beat them. They lose Stephon Diggs in this game. But the big story in this game was the quarterback for the Colts, Anthony Richardson, a guy who I've been critical of this year for how he's played. Third quarter, has a big run, takes a big hit, steps out, comes back into the game. They ask him in the post game, "Hey, what happened in the third quarter? Why'd you step out?" I was tired. And obviously, everyone reacts the way they should. Tired Anthony Richardson, 24-year-old Anthony Richardson, very tired, needs a nap, needs a blankie. Well, he's been benched now. And now for the rest of the season, we're going to see Joe Flacco, who is 40 years old and does not get tired in an NFL game. So, I mean, takeaways from this Texans Colts game, but also from the Colts benching Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, Anthony Richardson is gonna find some, I don't know, David Goggins, watch some Jocko Willink, watch some Andrew Tate. I don't know. Maybe he needs some of that toughness installed in him because I had to watch Pat McAfee not for 5 minutes like his normal segments, not for 10 minutes, but for 25 minutes try and make sense out of all this happening. He's going through all the situations in his mind, and he is the number one Colts guy. I feel like there's no other better spokesman for the Colts than Pat McAfee, other than Peyton Manning. But Peyton Manning is not going to come out there and criticize Richardson the way that McAfee did, where he's like very chill guy, but that there's some point where it's like if you're getting tired, you're 22 years old, you can still do conditioning when you have a hip injury. Like this doesn't make sense, and it doesn't happen. Where he's talking about players just don't come out in these games where you've seen someone like Philip Rivers play a conference championship game on a torn ACL. You've seen Joe Flacco tear his ACL on a drive and keep playing and finish out the drive and then come out in 2015 with the Baltimore Ravens. You've seen Matthew Stafford out there with broken fingers. You've seen Jared Goff out there with a sprained wrist playing a playoff game versus the Green Bay Packers. Like, and then you got tired because you were running around. You're talking about how, yeah, I'm a running quarterback. I'm the best athlete on the field. Well, maybe outside of Lamar, but you're talking about how that's the strength of your game. Where it's like, yeah, maybe I don't have the tools to be a passer, but like at some point, you have to focus on refining those tools as a passer. It's like the reason I like Anthony Richardson is he does show flashes as a passer. He does have the talent there where if he worked on it and if he honed it, he could, be a great passer. But what Pat McAfee said was like, it doesn't even seem like this guy knows like what the NFL stands for is not for long. Like this is a team that I was confused like what they're doing this year because they have the talent to go out there and win, but it just doesn't seem that Anthony Richardson is ready yet, and maybe he could benefit from a few years on the bench. Where we saw Jordan Love sit out, we've seen even Patrick Mahomes sit out. So it's like Anthony Richardson is someone who could definitely sit out, and the Colts could still make the playoffs with Joe Flacco. And then he kind of played himself out of the starting position there, where you go 10 for 32 and you repeatedly get hurt. And it seems like he's not backing off the whole threat quarterback thing where we've seen Lamar get stumped in a playoff game and we've seen Cam Newton's career get cut short. Like you think you could learn from some of the previous generations where we really hadn't seen the running quarterback position, and now that we're seeing these guys as they're older, it's like doesn't really seem like they age as well as someone who just stands in the pocket and doesn't take all of those big hits, but it seems like he's embracing that. Like it's just so many red flags going on for this guy, and it seems like he's going to have a real moment where it may take him having to go to another team and realizing like, oh, maybe I should have stayed a little bit longer. Maybe I should have worked on my passing a little bit more. Maybe I should have worked on my conditioning. Like what?
Yeah, the conditioning thing's amazing to me. But for Anthony Richardson, on my observation, he's only played 10 games. He hasn't been very accurate in any of those. He definitely needs to work as a passer. But I think his biggest problem right now is his maturity. This is a guy who is only 22 years old. He's one of the youngest quarterbacks in the league starting at a major level. Fourth overall pick. Was excellent at Florida, but overall, like this year he's been a complete mess. He's completing less than 50% of his passes. He's thrown a lot of interceptions. He's fumbled. And it feels like his instinct is to run rather than to pass. And this was my complaint with Justin Fields in Chicago. It's like At the end of the day, they have you as a quarterback. You need to push the ball down the field, and you have the talent to do so. You just got to put it all together. And unfortunately, I just don't think he's there yet. And I think whether Joe Flacco, like watching him play, is going to help or not, or maybe he's just not cut out for the NFL. Maybe he's not mature enough yet. There's something there where I just don't think he's ready to lead a franchise yet. And especially a team like the Colts, who maybe they don't win their division, but they should at least be contending for a wild card. He's going to prevent them to do that if he keeps playing the way he does. And obviously now him being benched, like it could be a huge move for him, or it could also just be a sign of a guy who maybe just doesn't pan out in the NFL.
Yeah, and this game was for the division. Like, you already played the Colts. It was for the division last year. We don't know if the Jags can really go on that kind of run where they can compete for the division. Maybe just a wild card position if they can pull it together here. But, like, it's just the run first mentality is tough, and not being in shape and getting injured last season. You would think that would make him say back, okay, maybe I should develop my passing game and I can learn to run when it's necessary and have that be a threat to on my game. But it's like Pat McAfee also talked about him, like, why would you say that you were tired in that moment? Because he pointed to a moment where Anthony Richardson fumbled it at one point, and he was like, it just looked like he fumbled it because he was tired. And one of the coaches told him on the sideline, like, if you're too tired to hold on to the ball, just let us know and we're going to take you out of the game for a rest break if you think you're going to fumble it just because you're tired there, which is like another reason, like, okay, what's the point of being athletic if you're gonna get gassed? Like, this was just an unheard of moment, but I do think like a lot of people are burying him, but like the only reason why people are going this hard on him is because we see the potential for him to be great. Like, you have the potential to be one of the best players in NFL history. You have the arm there. You can make some crazy throws. You can be accurate when you want to, but it just needs to be harnessed there. And I think the potential is there, but he's the one who just needs to realize that. And maybe it takes a moment where he gets benched and, maybe Shane Steichen goes out there and does his job. We'll have a short leash with him. Like, hey, this isn't going to work. And I'm doing this not only for my benefit to win right now, but I'm doing this for the benefit of your career because you need to learn not how to be the best player on the field, but you need to learn how to know how to win the game, even if it means you're not the best player on the field in that given moment.
I think the big thing that upset me with this game, not just about the being gassed part, but also like they had a chance to win it in the last minute of the game, and the way the drive went, like I question his NFL IQ too because first drive he runs not out of bounds, which is a big thing, and then he throws a completely inaccurate ball the second time around, and then ultimately I just the last drive when they really needed him to push the ball down the field and he's opting to run and not even running out of bounds when they have no timeouts. That was another thing that I didn't love from this game either. I think again, he's just somebody who needs maturity. Maybe he needs this year and then maybe even next year too to sit behind him and then at that point maybe then we can finally see him at his full potential, but he was a project coming out of college and it's showing that to be very true. So I think benching him is a good move by Shane Steichen, but also like this is probably his last. Like this is going to help him in the long run, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully, because the potential is there. And I do think that he can be one of the better quarterbacks in the league, which is like why I was excited to watch him with the Colts. But it's not even like sometimes it's not even in a fun way. It's just frustrating watching him run for repeated like 3 4 yard pickups, and you have that occasional big play, but it's just frustrating when you have Jonathan Taylor there. When as soon as Joe Flacco steps in, Josh Downs comes alive, starts putting up big numbers and pick up where he did left off last year, and you say like, okay, yeah, you do have a legitimate trio. And then as soon as Anthony Richards steps on, it's just him.
Yeah, it's the Anthony Richardson show. So hopefully, I mean, we'll see how it pans out. But Texans moved to 6-2. They look like they're in the driver's seat for that division. They lose Stephon Diggs in this game, and obviously Nico Collins is banged up too. It's like, how does that loss affect the Texans now? Do you like? I had them as a team that could go toe to toe with the Chiefs. At this point, I do not feel they are that team, especially even this season at large. Haven't been overly impressed with them. Is that the nail in the coffin for them? Do you think they can still be competitive against the Chiefs and Ravens, or is that kind of the end for them? You think?
Yeah, it just doesn't feel like their year this year. I think it'll be similar to last year where they win a playoff game, but CJ Stroud hasn't been as good as he was last year yet so far. It seems like they still have some issues with their offensive line now. I could see them like pulling it together with Nico Collins here, and it's still a long season, so need to see what they do in November. But so far, they haven't given me a reason to believe that they are definitively in that Super Bowl bubble. They're just hovering around a team that can win a playoff game so far. But just situationally, need to see them show up in November and December here, and you know you're gonna struggle but so will the Colts, so will the Jaguars. But you're gonna get Nico Collins back. He's on IR with the hamstring injury. Diggs is out for the year, but Diggs was more of just kind of icing player, and I think the Joe Mixon pickup has been way more important than Stephon Diggs. Where Stephon Diggs hasn't really made a huge impact, and I didn't really think he was the deciding factor for you getting to a Super Bowl. I thought that was Daniil Hunter, that was Joe Mixon, that was Nico Collins and CJ Stroud getting better in year two. And I've gotten that from Mixon and Danielle Hunter, but I haven't seen CJ Stroud get better in year two yet.
Yeah, I haven't seen it either. I am worried now because Stephon Diggs tore his ACL last year. It seems like he started to teeter off at the end of the season for the Bills. I worry if this is the last what we'll see of great Stephon Diggs, where that injury, like when he comes back, is he going to be as good as he was in Buffalo, like the first few years, or how great he was in Minnesota, or are we going to start to see Stephon Diggs go from a really great receiver to a really good receiver? And that's the one thing I worry about like this upcoming year for him when he returns.
Yeah, I think he's going to be like where Keenan Allen was like the last few years with the Chargers, where he'll be good on the field and like the best number two possible for you. However, or even a solid number one receiver for a lot of teams here, but not your preference if you want to win a Super Bowl. But just like having him like being on and off the field with injuries, he's probably going to be banged up. But that's just the reality when you sign a wide receiver to that much money when they're in their 30s. Like
Yeah.
kind of a huge gamble there.
Yeah, it is a huge risk. But got a couple of more games we want to talk about here. We'll start with another game that was kind of funny things that come from it. Commanders and Bears. This is, first overall pick versus second overall pick. And in this game, I mean, Jaden Daniels played a great game. Caleb Williams did not play a great game. He played a very ugly game at that. Big game from DeAndre Swift. But the real story of this game was the Hail Mary pass to win the game when Tyreek Stevenson is taunting the Commanders fans before the play. And then he ultimately gets burned by the receivers of Washington to lose the game for the Bears. That was hilarious to watch, first of all. Secondly, you want to talk about one of the most embarrassing taunts of all time, losing a game the way you do. Like, this is the thing, like, this kind of leads back to Chicago, too, and how cursed Chicago's been for the last ever, basically. You have a game where the Bears are at this point, they're 4-2 and they're looking good, about to win and be 5-2. So much momentum for the Bears at this point, even in that loaded division. And then just something stupid like this to set them off where they lose this game. Caleb has a terrible game. Like, it just, to me, it just feels like the Bears, they're not this new identified Chicago Bears team yet. They're still just the Chicago Bears. Even if they continue winning games, just it's not their year.
Yeah, I mean, it was never supposed to be their year. You had people like Nick Wright putting them in the Super Bowl with the Kansas City Chiefs here, saying that they could get there. Caleb Williams will be good enough to get them to a Super Bowl. It's like, yeah, like, do I think I can he can get them to the playoffs? Absolutely. Win a playoff game? Yeah, for sure. It depends on the matchup, but do I think that they're going to get to the Super Bowl? No, I still think it's the Lions division and it's the Lions year to get to the Super Bowl. They put in the work, they put in the times, they have the roster to do that. Now with the Bears, like this was his Dylan Brooks moment when he's taunting LeBron, and then LeBron just drops 40 at 38 years old on Dylan Brooks. And you just go out there. All you needed was someone on that receiver that was super preventable. How do you throw a Hail Mary to the end zone? Doesn't even make it to the end zone, but no one on your defense is in the end zone, and your head coach is a defensive head coach. Like, that's just something that can't happen, especially versus the Washington Commanders, where it's the battle of the rookies. The Commanders played a better game than you did, and somehow you're going to come out here, come away with the victory. And it was more of just the Bears really didn't deserve to win that game. And kind of the taunt was the thing that decided it, where if he was on that receiver the whole time, he was in the end zone, that Hail Mary doesn't go through. He was out of position, and then the entire team was out of position though because you had the entire team but one player outside of the end zone. I just don't understand how that happens for the Chicago Bears. But does it change my opinion on them? No. I still think this is a team that's going to get to the playoffs because they have an easy schedule, and then they'll build on that for next year. But this wasn't a team like Nick Red, like, oh, they'll get to the Super Bowl. Like, no.
No, it was not a pretty game. Ironically enough, with that Tyreek Stevenson play, is he was the guy that tipped the ball in the air for the receiver to catch it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the funniest part of it all. He was the reason why they scored. It wasn't just because he was out of position and it was a wide open person. No, the Hail Mary happens, he tips it, and then it falls into the hands of Noah Brown. Like that has got to be one of the most. That's like, I don't know if it's quite up to there with the butt fumble, but like if we're talking about embarrassing plays of this year at least, that's got to be number one.
No, it has to be. I mean, that is just the fact that you're the guy who ends up losing your team the game. Like, it's one thing if you're like Dylan Brooks and you can't score on offense and you play terrible on defense because you're going up against LeBron, but you just had to make sure the ball hits the ground, not tip it backwards, hit it forwards. Like, he didn't even have enough air on it to get it to the end zone there. And this is kind of a battle of the teams figuring it out. And it kind of showed that the Commanders are kind of still at the same level as the Chicago Bears because this was in Washington. So I could see this being a very different game if it was in Chicago, somewhere the Bears haven't lost in since last year, and they've been undefeated this season at home. So it's like if the Commanders were in Chicago, I think they lose that game. And then I picked the Bears to win this game, and they were close. They sleptwalked through most of the game, came alive in the fourth quarter, almost did it. The Commanders let them hang around. So it's like, I think it's a credit to the Chicago Bears defense that they were also able to hold the Commanders. Even though you allow the Hail Mary, you still held them down in this game when they were one of the top scoring teams in the league this year. That
Yeah,
gives
I
me a
mean,
little bit of hope.
realistically, they should have only scored 12 points in this game. So if you go at it at that sense, like I don't know. I mean, it was a D Swift touchdown, a couple of field goals, and that was what could have won you the game if it wasn't for Tyreek Stevenson. So they should feel good. I mean, that's the number one offense in the league outside of the Ravens. So that's a good win for. Still not a great game you want to lose though, for sure.
No, too low scoring.
Let's. I think another team we got to talk about. Let's. You want to get the Bills game out of the way. It's not a whole lot to talk about this Bills game. Um, Bills annihilate the Seahawks, dominate throughout. Big game for Josh Allen. Does throw his first pick though of the season. James Cook has a great game. Khalil Shakur has a big game. Not a huge game by any means for Amari Cooper, but Bills take care of business, shut down the Seahawks. No DK Metcalf for them, and that completely shut them down. Their running game was non existent either. Any comments on this game outside of what I mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's a huge storyline in this game where it looked like the Bills broke Seattle in this game. Like, did you see Geno Smith on the sideline? He was literally in tears, like, I don't know what else I can do to win us this game. Seemed like he was having a complete meltdown on the sideline. Seattle completely melted down at home versus the Buffalo Bills. I mean, you're in a position where you can win your division this year, and maybe this isn't a must-win game, but like, can you go out there and without DK Metcalf, suddenly you can't run the ball anymore? Where Zach Chardonnay and Kenneth Walker were good earlier this season, you've gone away from the run game. doesn't look the same as it did in September and early October. And now with DK Metcalf not being there, it left a gaping hole on this team. And if your offense is going to be that DK Metcalf reliant, it's like this isn't a team that's going to be able to take it far in the playoffs there. And you went from a team that probably could potentially win your division to looking up and seeing Puka Nakua and Cooper Cup return for the Rams, and then getting broken at home by the Buffalo Bills and Josh Allen, where it looked like there was no hope at all on that sideline. And maybe it'll motivate the Seattle Seahawks, but you beat a Falcons team that was just asleep last Sunday. They were looking forward to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. No excuse for the Falcons for losing that game, but it's like you still have only won one out of the last 3 year games after starting 3-0.
Yeah, they've just completely fallen off at this point. And part of it could be injuries too. I know DK, that's a big loss, but at the end of the day, I just don't think the Seahawks have always felt like they're going to be like an 8-9 team, and I think that's kind of the trajectory that we see with them. Um, but yeah, I think the Bills are the better team. Their defense, impressed with what I saw with the Bills' defense too, shutting down the run, especially Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet. Those were good backs, so credit to them. And then Josh Allen continuing what he's been doing all year. So not a whole lot to say for me in this game, but yeah, just Bills just dominate. This is kind of what the Bills do too, especially against lesser competition. Just beat up on those teams and you know kind of shell shock them a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, if the MVP and Super Bowl was based off of mediocre teams, then the Bills would be there every year. So would Josh Allen.
Exactly. Speaking of mediocre teams, though, last game of the week to cover. How about Niners and Cowboys? Yep, this is a game that did we call this game like exactly how we called it? I feel like we kind of nailed it.
Yeah, it's the
Niners.
battle of the mediocre teams. Who's more mediocre?
Well, not even that, but like the Niners in this game, like we said that the Niners were going to take care of business, probably own for part of the game, and then the Cowboys were just going to pour on some touchdowns in the fourth quarter to make it look a lot closer than it was. That's basically what happened. If you take out the fourth quarter, they won 27-10. You know, Brock Purdy plays fine, plays a good game, running game. They run all over the Cowboys because they have the worst running defense in all of football. And even with their injuries, they still managed to put some points on the board. But yeah, Cowboys, good lord, this is
Dak
getting
with the
ugly for them.
interceptions. He can't help himself. He's a pickaholic. He can't stop.
Yeah, yeah, and it's always in the red zone too. Actually, I feel like if you're gonna throw an interception, can you throw an interception like early in the drive so you don't get the excitement for your players? Like just get the interception, move on to the next. But no, it's got to be in the red zone when there's points on the board, and that's when he blows it up. I think he has like what 6 interceptions in the red zone this year.
Yeah.
It's a nightmare.
And now that Rico Doyle is out, you now have Dalvin Cook and Ezekiel Elliott as your running backs. The funniest meme to come out of this weekend had to be that picture of Dalvin Cook and Ezekiel Elliott. Lots of good entertainment from that. But this was the Cowboys. Like, I was like, okay, I could see like a big CeeDee Lamb game, and the 49ers have dominated them over the past few years. Like, maybe we finally get a game where the Cowboys come out and beat them in the regular season. It's like, nope, didn't happen. CeeDee Lamb, he did have a big game, but it was 13 catches, 146 yards, and 2 touchdowns. But sometimes I just buy into the Dak Prescott hype and like maybe I am being too hard on him. Maybe stats are the only thing that matters. But then I remember and see games like this and I'm like, oh no, all my takes about Dak Prescott are based. They have been right over the past few years. And while they may seem harsh when he goes out there and dominates a bad team, but when he needs to go out there and beat a team that is ravaged with injuries, they have a laundry list longer than I don't know, Senators socks. They have laundry lists longer than any road ever built of injuries on this team, everyone getting hurt on the San Francisco 49ers. Didn't even matter. Okay, maybe we won't beat you 42-10 in this game, but we'll still dominate you physically throughout the entire game after Brock Purdy had one of his worst games of the season versus the Chiefs on Sunday Night Football. And then this is also the Dallas Cowboys coming off a bye. This is the Cowboys after they had a week off, and then I know Micah Parsons didn't play in this game, but he's like, well, if you guys want to like take things personally, like I didn't see that coming. Like, why'd you guys like take this game personally when you beat us 42-10 on Sunday Night Football last time? Even though he wasn't there, it's like you have an entire bye to prepare for this team that has owned you the past few years, knocked the Cowboys Super Bowl window. And if they beat the 49ers in that game versus Brock Purdy, then you open the Super Bowl window. But they made sure that the Cowboys Super Bowl window never opened in that game. Then Amari Cooper leaves. Tony Pollard is now gone. The offensive line is over. Dan Quinn is now on that team, and we expected this team to have a losing record, and we still expect the 49ers to fall off a little bit as the regular season goes on because they're not on the same level as some of these other elite teams so far this year without McCaffrey, and now Debo is having injury issues. Jawan Jennings and Ayuk is out for the year. Javon Hargrave, Ufunga's dealing with injuries. Like the list goes on, and you still get dominated when you have like kind of a healthy team outside of, oh, I know everyone loves Deron Bland. God forbid
Defensive
you
player
don't
of the
have
year.
Deron Bland on that team. Defensive player of the year, Deron Bland and Micah Parsons.
Yeah, I mean the defense, sure. Like two of your biggest players are gone. That's bound to affect your team, but you basically lost 27-10 at the end of the day. I feel like the 49ers for the Cowboys are equivalent to what the Jets and Patriots matchup has become. Granted, much better teams, playoff teams, but at the same idea, like the 49ers just have your number each and every year. And I feel like the last decade, especially, the Niners just walk up and down the Cowboys. And I guess if you go further back, the 49ers still reign supreme. But this is one of those games that the Cowboys needed to win. They have negative momentum. The 49ers, like, if their season fails, it's like, okay, no Christian McCaffrey, no Ayuk, our team's falling apart. Like, you can justify this to the front office. Like, okay, well, we had a lot of injuries, didn't go our way. Cowboys, it's we didn't upgrade our running position when we lost Tony Pollard. We replaced it with two guys who would have been great in 2017, but unfortunately, that's long past at this point. And then you don't replace or get another receiver to complement CeeDee Lamb. Your offensive line, you lose offensive talent, it only gets worse. And then you pay Dak Prescott to become the richest quarterback in history. And now he's playing like a below average quarterback at this point. His QBR is 84 this year. He's leading the league in interceptions, red zone interceptions, especially. Like this is exactly what you expect the Cowboys to be, but Cowboys like this is not surprising to me at all. I knew the Niners were going to win, even with the injuries. They just own the Cowboys historically. So I think it's only going to get uglier for the Cowboys as the season progresses.
Yeah, it's kind of isn't it kind of sad when they're this bad this early because it's kind of fun watching them be good and then just be disappointing in the playoffs, like getting killed by Jordan Love when their fans actually think they're going to get to and win a Super Bowl with Dak, but it's kind of sad when they're just this bad this early in the season.
Yeah. Well, maybe there'll be some turnarounds. They face the Falcons next week. Maybe they bring optimism back to that team. But they've been outscored 77-31 the last two games.
That is crazy.
And if you take out the fourth quarter, it's 77-24. No, 77-17. That's bad.
Oh my
That's
god.
really bad. Yeah, they've been annihilated. And then after that, it's just the Steelers and Giants game, which were just gritty wins. Like it hasn't been pretty for them at all this season, and it's only going to get worse.
You know, I said this
But
coming into this year, they didn't have any offense besides CeeDee Lamb.
and they don't. Outside of the Giants, they're the worst offense in this division by a mile. Um, so yeah, they're kind of screwed, and they're also too cheap to pay for the DeAndre Hopkins of the world, the Derrick Henrys of the world, the Amari Coopers. The list goes on. All the people that got the rest of the league better, they're too poor to afford, even though they are the richest brand in all of sports. By the way, that's something
Deontay
that's worth
Johnson,
mentioning.
you can't do a fifth for a 6 round pick swap. Like, what?
Yeah, so the Cowboys like they're not even trying at this point. It's just you might as well fire Mike McCarthy now, honestly. But we covered all the games in Week 8 of the NFL. Um, gave our live reactions, talked about the trades that happened around the NFL as well. Even talked about a little bit of baseball, which that's exciting to 4 people out of 100. But one thing we are forgetting to do, and that is the worst top 10. Unless there's anything that we haven't covered yet that worth being covered. Documents are out. They're ready to
Yeah,
go.
documents are out. The documents
They,
also say, quick announcement, this is the most ever head coaching jobs that have been available in the NBA. So if you're looking for a head coaching job, probably for minimum wage, have your application here. Just need to get that out of the way for our weekly WNBA news segment. But we do have the worst top 5 documents, speaking of the WNBA, of the
Worst top 5 according to the Brickyard. Obviously, this is with merit. This is with honesty, and this is also with integrity. So when we go over these worst top 5 teams, there's a lot of things that play in mind. How disappointing are they? How pathetic are they? And worst of all, how much do they make their fans cry? There's a couple of teams this week that will not be included that you would think might be here, but for a number of reasons, they will not be. Number one, the Cleveland Browns. They are exonerated from this list for the time being because they brought in Jameis Winston Churchill to bring faith and unity back to Cleveland. Thank God they haven't been the same since LeBron left. But Jameis Winston Churchill, he is back donning the cape for them. So they are excluded from this list for the time being. The Patriots are excluded as well. When you are 23-4 against the Jets since the Jets have last made the playoffs, you are exonerated from this list for at least 1 week. The Jaguars are also not included because they played a good game against the Packers. Nothing to complain about here. And the last team that will not be included on this list is the Panthers, simply because of fatigue. I'm just tired of talking about the Panthers and how pathetic they are with Bryce Young and David Tepper and Gabe Canales. So, Panthers, you get a week off. More or less, we'll call it a bye week because I have other teams that need to be bullied. How about at number 5? The Cincinnati Bengals. Good God, if you told me you had a top 5 quarterback, a top 5 wide receiver, T. Higgins, who is a top 5 number 2 option on this team, and that you guys are sitting here at 3-5 because you guys cannot wake up in the month of September. And now, when you lose to the Eagles this time around, greatly detriments your team. Well, looking back, maybe you shouldn't have lost to the Patriots in this game. Maybe you should have gotten the wheels started earlier. There's no reason why your team should be 3-5. You should be 5-3. You should be competing in this division, but you're disappointing. You're letting your team down, and you're letting your fans down. So therefore, the Bengals, please let me take you off this list. But what are we doing at this point? You got to start winning games at this point. Run the table. Be competitive. You're supposed to be competing with the Ravens and Chiefs, and right now you can't even compete with the Eagles. Number 4, it's time that I added them to this list because they have the longest losing streak in all of the NFL. I understand that they are playing with third strings, fourth strings, XFL players, Pop Warner players at this point, but the New Orleans Saints have to be on this list. 6 consecutive losses. They started off the season so high. 2 40-point games. We're like, wow, put this team in the Super Bowl right away. And since then, they have proceeded to get worse and worse and worse. And now they're rocking the Bub Memes and Spencer Radlers of the world. It's not looking pretty for this New Orleans Saints team. I will not continue to beat on them too hard because they are falling apart, but they deserve to be one of the worst teams in the league, according to the Brickyard. Number 3, the New York Jets. How do you have a Hall of Fame quarterback, Hall of Fame wide receiver, alleged great defense, followed by Sauce Gardner? You're supposed to have this great running back, promising young receiver. You outperform on the ground against the Patriots, and yet you are worse than the Patriots. You're 2-6 when you put all these chips on the table. Hell, you even last year signed Mike Williams and Alan Lazard to fill your needs, and it only gets worse for you each and every week. The Jets continue to Jets, and I don't think that they're going to get any better. If anything, I think they're going to probably finish 5-12, 6-11, and captivate one of the most disappointing seasons of all time for any sports team, and for the Jets, just an average year for them. Number 2, I have the New York Giants. Can we give up on Daniel Jones already? It's been 6 years now, and it's failed. He has one season where he's above 500, and they barely squeak into the playoffs, and they barely beat the Vikings. Give up on him. 1 out of 6 years, you've been okay. And ever since, you've been dog shit. You haven't scored a touchdown in 2 years at home with your quarterback. You like that? I don't. When NHL players are outscoring Daniel Jones at MetLife, that's a bad sign. It's time to give up on them. The Giants, just pathetic at this point, but not as competitive, not as nearly as pathetic as the team we just recently spoke about, the Dallas Cowboys at number one. You have the highest paid quarterback ever. He has 8 interceptions, a QBR of 84. You've been outscored 74-17 outside of the fourth quarter of the last 2 games, and you're led by Dementia Jerry running the operation. I mean, good God, the Cowboys. You want to talk about a disappointing brand? More disappointing than the Lakers and Yankees. You're the face of sports at this point, and yet you continuously underperform, don't spend, don't try, and just be absolutely pathetic. Cowboys, you are the worst team according to the Brickyard.
I agree. Cowboys have to be the worst team because it is what you said. It's all about the brand. It's all about underachieving, having the opportunities, and it's not for lack of options out there for the Dallas Cowboys. Derrick Henry would have been happy to be a Cowboy. DeAndre Hopkins, maybe not so much because he's played with some pretty bad quarterbacks. I don't think he wants to add Dak Prescott to the list of quarterbacks that he's played with. I think he'd rather be with Mahomes at this point. And then you also, you know, you lose Dan Quinn and you keep Mike McCarthy. It's like you could have made a head coaching change where teams like the Panthers have made a head coaching change here. It's not for lack of opportunity for the Giants to be good because again, as you mentioned it, you said 6 years with Daniel Jones, which is I feel like the important context of these are legitimately the five worst teams with the Jets because it's like the Jets like again missed opportunities. The Bengals missed opportunities, and it seems like just a theme with this worst top five again is all the chances that these teams have had to really improve. Where you look at the Saints, it's like they've crumbled, but that's a lot of injuries here. You're in a salary cap. It's understandable why you're bad. Like the Giants, the Bengals, the Jets, and the Cowboys. All of these teams on the top four, like this is like the best top five where teams like they really don't have an excuse to be on this list. Like they've had plenty of opportunities to correct these mistakes.
Plus, like for the Bengals, you have a top five quarterback and a top five wide receiver. The Cowboys, I mean, even without bad Dak's played this year, at least like he's a quarterback that can start in the NFL and be a good quarterback. So like, and you have CeeDee Lamb too. Like you have a good situation there, better than most situations. And then the Jets, like you're going all in on a team that you think was going to win the Super Bowl, and this team might not beat the Patriots this year. Like, come on now. Like you might be worse than the Patriots. How's that even possible? They're starting Gerard Mayo as their head coach, and he's performing better than you are. Give me a break. So yeah, all these
Yeah.
teams that deserve it, they deserve to be here. There's a reason why they made it on the worst top fives, and they might continue to be on the worst top fives if they keep it up.
Yeah. No, this is something for the top five. It's not one of those times where now you always say congratulations. Like, nope, you don't want to be congratulated for being on this list. Not at all.
It's a disgraced list, and pains me to put these teams on here, but they also are well within reach and well deserve it.
Yeah. No, I sat next to this boomer on the lawn for Post Malone. So you like get there and it's just at the Formula One track where they race there. And it's like kind of the side part. So it almost feels like a fairground parking where everyone parks in a field there. But it was free, so you can't complain. And then Post Malone is like goes on this like drunk rant because he was trashed for like 15 minutes introducing his band because it was the last show of tour. And this dad is there with like three of his daughters and their friend. He's like, "Oh my god, can this guy just play a song already?" And then he's like, "I
Nice.
want to introduce to you guys the best the best, the like the greatest guy I know and the best player I know on tour. I met him 3 months ago, and he's like, "Nope, it's Flea. Play us a song. We don't want to hear about this guy. The best bass player in the world is Flea."
Isn't the guy from the Red Hot Chili Peppers?
Yeah, it's like no, it's Victor Wooten probably for the best bass player in the world. I think we can
I don't.
all agree there. But like, it was funny. It was just like we had the commentary from him the entire show, and then he was like, "Hey, I don't want to see any of you girls on your phones, okay?"
Oh God, one of those people.
Yeah.
The worst. Damn. How was the show overall though for Post Malone?
It was good. It was kind of exactly what I expected. I'm not like a huge Post Malone fan, like listen to his music all the time, but he was a good live performer. He did it with like country artists, because he just did F1 Trillion. But I like that did play a lot of his older music. Rockstar Live was really cool.
Hmm.
That went hard. And then just when he played all of his older songs, it was really good. He's kind of struggling to keep it together though with his voice, since it was the last show of tour, and he was pretty trashed the entire
Yeah.
show. So it's just him like, guys, thank you so much. This is amazing. So it was just a wholesome all around show. Just what you want. It was like a fun time.
Yeah, that's what we pay for. That's awesome. Well, we recapped every game from week 8. We gave our worst top fives. We talked about trades and everything else. Anything else we should talk about before we get bricked?
Yeah, grades will be out tomorrow. Mid-season awards. Look at the playoff picture halfway through, and then preview week 9 coming into the season. But we need to recap the first half of the season, so you're definitely not gonna miss that live show tomorrow. We're gonna be here on YouTube, but most importantly, before that, and once you join us, stay brick.
Stay brick. Beautiful.
There we go.
I just realized that next week we switch over time zones.